Hi everybody, so today we'll be working on some of the supportive muscular groups and working on some of the things that might help you to improve your sun salutation, your Surya Namaskar. You'll need two blocks and a belt to work through this practice depending on your own capacity as well. So we'll start by sitting on our block in a cross-legged seated position. We want to cross at the shins as opposed to the ankles. We want to have the knees the same height as the hips, and sitting up on the block just helps us to kind of come more into an upright position. We draw the flesh out from underneath the buttocks, sitting nice and tall on the sitting bones. Then we're going to turn the fingers out, have the inner elbows turning forward and plugging the arm bones back into their sockets so we broaden across the chest. So rolling the arms back from the shoulders and broadening across the collarbones, feeling the skin actually kind of stretching here and lifting that sternum up into the space that you've created. With the shoulder blades flat to the back, feel the lifting of the sternum might make those bottom ribs puff out a little bit. So rein those bottom ribs back in, pull the belly in slightly, and then imagine that you're pushing yourself or pushing your buttocks down into the block, and use that action to sort of zip up the front of your abdomen. So pulling the belly in slightly and making sure that you aren't arching into the back too much, nor are you collapsing the front body. So somewhere in the middle should feel like the side body is nice and long. All right, once you've got that lift and that length that you got from pushing into the hands, see if you can keep this length and take one hand at a time onto the knees, bending the elbows slightly and pulling a little bit on the knees just to lift this front armpit up and to tuck the back armpit in slightly. So same thing, just getting a little bit of a lift in that front chest. And then you can allow the eyes to close, draw the face back slightly, move the neck a little bit from side to side to make sure the neck is loose and relaxed. And you can sway forward and backward as well, just to check in to see if you are leaning too far forward or too far back, and a little bit to the left and right to find your balance. Once you're in balance, notice the inhale breath and exhale breath, and use the inhale breath to lengthen the spine uprights a little bit more, and the exhale breath to release unnecessary tension in the body. So we keep the extension and length of the spine without unnecessarily tightening up the body, tightening up the shoulders, etc. So just take a couple of deep inhales and exhales and settle into the seat. Just checking in with however you're feeling today. There's no prerequisite for how you need to be feeling when you do your practice. Just start where you are. We'll start the class with 3 arms. So we're going to bring our hands in front of the heart in prayer position, having the thumbs resting against the sternum and drawing the fingers away slightly. We'll take a deep inhale, exhale to empty the lungs completely, and then you can chant 3 arms with me. Take a deep inhale, exhale breath. Inhale. Inhale to lengthen the spine, and then exhale to bow the head to the heart, keeping the spine nice and long. Release the hands down to the thighs with the palms facing up. Inhale, raise your head up, and exhale, open the eyes. Okay, great. So we can come onto all fours. We're going to start off with our Adho Mukha Virasana, our downward facing hero pose. And we'll start with one block underneath the forehead. So knees are wide enough apart. The toes are touching, ankles drawn slightly in so that we're on the midline of the shin and the top of the foot. The knees wide enough apart so that those bottom floating ribs come into contact with the inner thighs just slightly, and we have a little bit of space for the abdomen to breathe. So we're going to come forward and place a block underneath the forehead. So extending the arms forward and then moving the block into place on the forehead. So with the hands a little bit wider than shoulder width apart, try and ground into that space between the index finger and the thumb, and feel as you
ground in there that the shoulders kind of want to roll in. So keep the hands grounded down in that space in the inside edge of the hand, and then turn the arms out in the opposite direction, making a bit of space in the shoulders. And just be conscious of, while your head is on this block here, you have a little bit more access to that dorsal spine region. So you can think about extending the rib cage forward and allowing the forehead to be at ease, but a little bit more space underneath the body allows that dorsal spine to sink in a little bit. Just breathe here for a few breaths, feeling the relative openness in the armpits, the shoulders, a little bit of contact on those bottom knees, on the inside edge of the thighs. That's encouraging you to lengthen forward. And the neck should be relatively loose and relaxed. So we don't want to have the shoulders creeping up. We want to subtly draw the shoulders away from the ears. Okay, then the next variation, we basically just lift the head, we slide the block out of the way, and we lower our head down to the floor now. So now the forehead is on the floor. Same difference here. You might find it a little bit more challenging to get the head down and to get that same openness into the dorsal spine. But now that you have a sense of it, you can think about lengthening that undercarriage of the body forward a little bit more to create the space underneath the body to allow the back dorsal spine to sink in. So grounding into the hands, once again, turning the arms on. We want to have the elbows straight and push down into the hands to activate into those shoulders a little bit more. So extending forward, but also drawing back a little bit. So imagine subtly pulling your belly, your lower belly, in towards the spine and lengthening that middle spine here along down towards the tailbone, so that the sitting bones come in contact with those heels. If you can't get your sitting bones down onto your heels, then put a pillow or a blanket or a block underneath there so that you have some kind of tactile feedback between your buttocks and the heels, so at least you can feel when you are indeed grounding down. All right, so if any of these subsequent postures are enough for you, your head on the block, that's fine. If coming down like this is okay and it's a challenge enough for you to stay like this, that's great. If you want to go a little bit further and open up the shoulders a little bit more, you can bring your hands onto blocks. So hand on each block, and extending your arms forward, have the heel of your hand at the edge of the block, and then once again bring your head down to the floor. So a little bit more challenging into the shoulders here, into the armpits, striving to push down subtly on those blocks, turning the arms out and feeling that inner armpit is lifting up while the outer armpit is drawing down. So you can experiment. If you let the inside edge of the armpit drop in, kind of the shoulder blades creep up and you get a little bit of compression into the neck. So by lifting the inner armpit that's closest to your neck, lifting that part up and taking the outside edge of the arm down, you kind of roll the arms away and create a little bit more space in the neck. Hands awake and alive, arms straight and strong, a subtle drawing in of those outer ankles and a little bit of a pulling in of the belly button creates this really nice Adho Mukha Virasana downward facing hero pose. Okay, great. Then we're going to inhale, come up onto all fours from there. And we're going to set ourselves up in Virasana. So we want to have our knees together and our feet wide enough apart so that we'll eventually be able to sit down between the knees, right? So we'll work with the belt, especially if you have tighter shoulders. And you can place a block between your feet or two blocks if it's a bit difficult for you to sit like this. So knees together, feet apart, sitting back down onto the block and making sure that we can slide our hands between the space between the hips and those heels, because we want to eventually be able to sit down on the floor. That subtle tendency for the thighs and the knees to roll in can get compensated for by taking your hands next to you, pushing in and lifting yourself off your blocks, then squeezing the thighs in towards the midline to get the thighs to lift up, but then keep that subtle squeezing of the thighs inward and pull your bum back to sit down on the block again. Okay? So we're in Virasana. Check and see if this is tolerable for you. If it isn't, you can always sit in a cross-legged position or add another block underneath your seat. Then we taking the belt and we're placing it over the shoulder, because we're going to reach our right arm up and get this length and extension into the arm.
So we can encourage that length by grabbing around the kind of armpit area and this back shoulder blade area using the thumb. We guide the armpit up and we pull that shoulder blade kind of down and forward slightly to create a rotational action into the shoulder girdle. This striving up of the elbow remains, and we drop our hand back behind the head, placing the hand just kind of behind the shoulder blades here. We don't want to take the arm too far over so it pushes the head forward. We want to still be able to keep our head upright and just have this lengthening of the arm up towards the ceiling. Then we're going to take our left arm out, turn the thumb down and bring the arm back around behind us and get that belt into your left hand, holding on to the belt with the top hand as well, the right hand, and then strive up with your right elbow towards the ceiling, pull the right shoulder blade down, and then try to walk your hands a bit closer towards each other. So it's okay to puff out the rib cage initially when you get this position in place, but then try to rein it back in by pulling your belly a little bit towards the spine and once again pushing your buttocks into the block to engage some of those abdominal muscles. So that constrains the bottom half of the body. Then we strive upward again with that right elbow and we pull the left arm back slightly to broaden across the left chest. So hold here for a few breaths, just check and see where you're feeling tightness. Also just checking in with the legs if it's not too painful in the legs or the feet. Remember, if the tops of your feet are quite sensitive or if your knees are sensitive, you can always put a blanket underneath your shins, knees and tops of the feet. So lengthening up, broadening across the chest there. Deep inhale, see if you can exhale and soften a little bit and allow that right arm to come back a bit more. And then we're going to release and take the hands down to the floor. All right, just let the blood flow back into the hands if you quite tighten your shoulders, and then we'll go the other side. So the intent here, like I said, is to be in a seated posture without distortion into that rib cage. So if you have the tendency of puffing the chest out, you need to rein that in. So you can remain seated in the place you are. I'm just showing from the side. If you have larger calf muscles, you can always reach behind the knees, pull the calf muscles flatten down, and then sit back down onto your block. Drawing the flesh out, come into a nice seated posture, and once again we can lift the bum up, squeeze the thighs towards the midline, pull the buttocks back, and then sit down. So we have this lift of the inner thighs, this rolling of the legs out, and the grounding of the feet down to the floor. Remember, a little bit of space there. Okay, so we're going to the other side now. You can see my shoulders are also quite tight here, so the tendency to want to puff out the chest is real. So we want to take the left arm up now, extending it up toward the ceiling. I'm going to grab around that arm again as need be, and we lift the armpit up with the thumb, and we pull that shoulder blade forward and down with the rest of the hand, lengthening into the fingernails. So striving upward with this bottom part of the arm, or the top part of the arm, to the elbow, and then dropping the hand behind the head with this lengthening upward as best as we can. If you need a belt, take a belt, so you can put that over your left shoulder now. Okay, so left shoulder, and then we grab the belt behind us and we hold onto the belt with the right hand. So remember, taking your hand out and around gets a little bit more space into that shoulder. So I'm just showing the shape here. So clasping onto the belt, strive upward with your left elbow, pull the left shoulder down to create more rotation and space in that shoulder. Walk your hands closer towards each other if possible. And then once you've gotten maximum amount of openness there, pull your bottom ribs in slightly and root your buttocks down towards the block. So feel an opening across the chest. Make sure your head is not getting involved, so you haven't gone to the point where your arm has drifted over and pushed your head forward. You want to be able to sit nice and tall and upright and concentrate the tension or the work in the shoulders. Okay, so remember the arm that's coming from underneath, we're broadening across that chest, and the arm that's coming over the top, we're striving upward with the elbow and pulling the shoulder down to make that rotation happen. Okay, great. And then we're going to release that out, taking our hands back down. Obviously, if you feel that some of these postures really work for you, you can hold them for a little bit longer. You can always just pause the video and hold them for a little bit longer. Okay, then we're coming into our downward facing dog pose. So working into Adho Mukha Virasana, we'll Adho Mukha Svanasana, should I say, we're going to work into two different variations first that'll make us just feel how the alignment usually works. So our tendency is to have our hands shoulder width apart, so we're going to take our hands a little bit wider, okay? We're going to take our feet a little bit wider, really kind of just to the edges of the mat. So make sure your body can go into a plank position once you're kind of up onto all fours, and then work from there to push yourself back into your downward facing dog. So with your feet slightly wider apart, you can turn the toes in a little bit and take the ankles out, and the hands slightly wider than shoulder width apart, you can turn the fingers out and get a bit of broadness across the back there. So just feeling how this changes the dynamic of the posture. If you're used to doing downward facing dog in the usual way, you can feel a bit more of a kind of stretch and lengthening in some parts of the calf muscles, maybe the heels, etc. But you also want to feel a little bit of more of a plugging in of those outer armpits in as you roll the arms out. So getting a bit more broadness between the shoulder blades, but getting a nice integration of the side body armpit into the posture. Pull those kneecaps up, keep the thigh muscles awake and alive, and then we release the knees down. Okay, we'll work into another variation, which is kind of tricky. So we're going to keep the feet and the hands together now. So you can set your hands up kind of in a bit of a mudra on the mat. So fingers spread nice and wide, your hands are turned in a little bit now. We still want to keep the arms rolling out, and we want to have our feet now close together. So if you came forward, you would have this kind of plank position, a narrow kind of version of plank position. So inhale, and then exhale, push back, coming into your down facing dog again. So just feeling how this changes the dynamic, okay? So maybe a bit more of a work in the tricep area of the arm. Maybe easier for you to come up, maybe a bit harder. If you quite tighten your backs of your legs, it makes it more difficult as we bring the legs together. So I kind of sometimes call this greyhound pose because we're so thin and narrow. So still pushing strongly through the hands. Make sure the head is loose and relaxed. Try and get those shoulders away from the ears. So rolling the bicep, the inside edge of your arm, kind of forward towards your hands as you take the outside edge of the arm back towards the toes. Lift the buttocks up, draw the heels down, and then we release down again. So just take a breath or two there. So sometimes creating contrast as we do some of these postures helps us just to get a bit more sensitivity into what is actually happening when we're doing our traditional variation of the posture, which can become a little bit stale because we repeat it a lot of times and maybe lose that sensitivity. So we'll go into our Adho Mukha Svanasana now, our downward facing dog pose. And we can start by setting the hands up, shoulder width apart, and already starting to imagine that you're screwing your hands into the floor. So turning those inner elbows forward, plugging the arm bones back, rolling the arm bones back into their sockets, and recruiting some of those upper back muscles so it's not all just about the shoulders. Okay, then the toes curl underneath and we come back into our flat plank position. So a plank position, your arm bones are stacked on top of one another and your face should be a little bit ahead of the tips of the fingers, your eye line. So from there we inhale and then exhale, lift up and push back into our downward facing dog pose. So the idea is to push through the hands strongly, to turn those inner biceps forward, to draw the arm bones up into their sockets, let the head hang loose. The legs are awake and alive, so we're pulling those kneecaps up, we're striving back with the thigh muscles onto the bones, lengthening the heel down to the floor as you sharpen your buttocks up to the ceiling, and then pulling those bottom ribs in slightly as you let the head hang loose and down. So the bottom ribs need to be drawn in, especially if you're quite flexible in your lower back. There might be a tendency to just dump down towards the floor and let those bottom ribs stick out. So try to rein them back in a little bit and then reach the heels down to the floor as you lift the buttocks up. Pushing strongly through the hands and breathing the whole time. Okay. Adho Mukha Svanasana, a really nice extension and length of the spine and the side body. And then releasing the knees down. And we take a little bit of a breather there. So, yeah. Just examining how having your hands a little bit wider, your hands a little bit narrower, feet wider, narrower might change the dynamic in the legs, where you're getting a stretch, and all of those kinds of things. All right, so we're going to come into Tadasana now, mountain pose, and we really want to bring a bit of a focus to the shoulder. So this idea of bringing the shoulder blades flat back behind you, we don't want to squeeze the shoulder blades together, we just want to flatten them behind us. So we want to have broadness in the front body, in the chest, but we also want to have broadness on the back body. So you can let your arms come down next to the side body, have your feet together in your stance, and then turn the kind of arms in their sockets. So using that rotation of the arm, feel how that broadens the skin of the front body. Then continue with that action and just gently pull the shoulder blades flat to the back behind you. So feel as though the shoulder blades are coming back almost kind of like hands and sitting flat behind the back. And they're subtly moving forward to also help and broaden across the chest. The inner elbows are facing forward. We're reaching the fingertips down, striving into the heels of the feet and lengthening the crown of the head up. But really, so much concentration here on what's happening in the chest, and the arms and the shoulder blades. Okay? So you can extend your fingertips down towards the floor to create a bit of space in the neck, and really just working to flatten the shoulder blades and feel like that these muscles here on the side of the body are starting to become awake and alive and get some engagement also between those muscles in the upper back without squeezing together, like I said. So there's broadness and just alignment, really. So getting a little bit more of a subtle feeling rather than just an overt squeezing of the shoulder blades together. Okay, great. Okay, so with some of this more shoulder blade awareness now, we can take that awareness into some of our standing poses, and we'll start out with our Trikonasana. So standing in the middle of your mat in Tadasana, if you've got knee issues, you're going to step your feet wide apart. But if you're able to, you take your hands on an inhale breath to the chest, and then hop the feet nice and wide apart. So we want to use this hopping action to almost animate or enliven the posture. Okay, so it's not just for aesthetic purposes that we hop our feet apart. We want to feel this lifting and this jumping action is translated into the lifting of the arms and the lengthening of that side body. We want to get our feet relatively wide apart. Ultimately, you want to be able to draw a plumb line down from your wrist straight down towards the leg. So you're working to get your legs that wide apart. We're going to turn the right toes out and turn the left toes in slightly. And remember, in Trikonasana, in our open hip standing poses, we want to have that front foot giving us an imaginary line to cut that back foot in half just towards the back of the inner arch. So if you had to have a line drawn down the middle of your mat, that would be the kind of alignment that you'd be going for. If you need blocks in this posture, in other words, if you can't get your hands down to the floor or the shin, then place the blocks over here at the front of the mat. Okay. Otherwise, arms up nice and tall, straight and strong. Now remember, working with that shoulder blade focus. So we'll turn our palms up first, inner elbows facing up and drawing the shoulder blades down, getting them to integrate into the back. Okay. Then we turn the palms down again, pulling up through the side body on an inhale breath. You can push into the outside edge of the back foot and lengthen out towards the right, and then take your right hand down to the right shin. Okay. So this hand can rest on the shin. It's not a cheat to have your hand resting here. Just try not to make it be super heavy. So with this understanding of the shoulder blade, we roll that top shoulder blade back. Okay, so that's that same action of turning the inner elbow up as we did before when we were in upright position, and roll that shoulder blade away from the top ear. If your arm hurts bringing it up from the side, you can always swing it from underneath and bring it up. But today I want you to drop your hand forward and then slide that shoulder blade back a little bit more, and then bring the arm up. So you can feel that opens up the chest a bit more to work there. Then you can think about the bottom shoulder blade almost kind of coming through from underneath. So use the turning of your arms to turn your inner elbow to face where your toes are pointing. Roll that shoulder blade back, and then almost feel like that shoulder blade is tucking in and then coming forward underneath here to open up your posture a little bit more. So you're using the shoulder blades in essence to augment the top part of the body and to facilitate the twisting of the top part of the body. Ground into your feet, nice strong activation of the legs, and then turn your gaze to look up at your top hand if it doesn't hurt your neck. All right, breathing here. Nice deep inhales and exhales. See if you can soften these top ribs a little bit on your exhale breath and extend the bottom ribs a little bit more. All right, and then pushing into the outside edge of the back foot, take an inhale, following the top hand and come up into your standing pose. All right, so we're going to turn the toes in and release the hands to the waist and take a breather here. So I'll just turn around and give you a sense of what we're doing on the other side. Okay, so hands coming up in front of the heart. Take a deep inhale, bend the knees, and hop the feet apart. All right, so turning the toes in now and turning the other toes out. We're going to lift up through the side body, and we're going to extend out. We're going to extend out towards the left. Okay, so lengthening down and coming down. So I'm just showing you from behind. You'll be going the opposite way. So as we come down here, we want to feel this lengthening of the front chest, this opening across the front chest, and that integration of that top shoulder. So if your elbows have rolled in, or your hands are out of alignment, that'll impact on the top, on both shoulders, right? So we want to turn the inner arms of both the bottom arm and the top arm. We want to turn those inner elbows to face forward and use that rotation into the shoulder to create a bit of space. Remember this action of dropping the top arm over and extending it forward and then sliding that shoulder blade back before you lift the arm up should create more space in the chest. And on the bottom arm, we're turning this arm back, getting the shoulder blade to integrate in behind us here, and feeling that the shoulder blade is moving forward and underneath as we turn the body open. So the shoulders helping us to turn the top torso open, grounding into the legs, pull the kneecaps up, awake and alive, pull that back leg's hip open, move the front leg's buttock slightly forward, and reach your top hand up, and look up at your top hand with your bottom eye. If it hurts your neck though, keep looking forward or look down at your front foot. And then we take a nice deep inhale, pushing into the outside edge of the back foot. We inhale, come all the way up, turning the toes in, hands to the chest, and we can hop our feet together again. So just feeling the difference of having a little bit more awareness in the shoulder blades and how that's very useful. So it's a little bit of a recovery pose because we've got all this external rotation into the legs in our Trikonasana. We can turn our toes in slightly and go for an internal rotation. So if you can't get your hands down to the floor, place 2 blocks in front of you like that. Okay, so turning the toes in so that there's a rolling of the legs in to start with. We can take our hands to our hips, lift up, deep inhale, up all the way into the side body, and we extend forward and bring our hands down onto the blocks. So just to show you from the side, the idea is to extend the undercarriage of the body forward, to have this lift in the backs of the legs up. And that's why putting the blocks in place, even if you have the flexibility to come all the way forward, is a good reminder to roll those arms out of the way, turning the inner elbows forward, shoulder blades back once again, and extending the undercarriage of the body forward as we lift the skin of the back of the legs up. Once you've got that position, then you can slowly start to turn the blocks down, still reminding yourself to lengthen in the front body, and as need be, you can bring your hands to the floor. So if your hands can come to the floor in front of you, that's great. If you're able to, you can take them a little bit further back and place the heel of the hand in line with the heel of the foot and begin to bend the elbows and come forward into your forward fold. So from the side and from the front. Hands on the blocks, we're looking forward, striving forward. Once we've got this extension in the front body, we start to lengthen forward, hinging forward, and then let the head point down at the floor, bending the elbows as need be. Your hands and elbows remain shoulder width apart, so try and draw the elbows in and feel a subtle kind of pushing into the heel of the hand to tilt the body further forward, and a little bit of a pulling on the fingertips to remind you to extend the torso forward out of the waist. And just come down as need be, as necessary. Remember, you don't have to get your head down to the floor, but try to get a nice elongation in the back of the neck at least, and pull up through the legs. So even if your head does come down onto the floor, you don't want to be dumping down into your head. You want to keep most of the action happening in the legs. So the grounding of the inside and outside edge of the foot is key. Pulling up of the whole leg, sharpening those buttocks up. Imagine that you're drawing the legs into the femur head into the socket, and then you are hinging forward at that point. So the legs are really holding most of the weight, even if your hands and your head do come down to the floor. And then from there, you're going to slowly walk your hands forward, bringing your hands onto blocks if need be, or just coming up onto your fingertips to get that openness across the chest. You can toe heel the feet a bit closer towards each other, releasing the hands to the hips, and then inhale, coming up into your standing posture. So as you stand up, you can think about kind of rolling your inner thighs forward, and that helps to kind of get the legs online and roll them back into a neutral position. Great. Okay, stepping your feet together and just shaking it out. Okay, so we've worked quite extensively into the legs. We've got some nice warmth into the legs, and the shoulders should be relatively warmed up as well. We want to start to experiment or try and get into Malasana, our garland pose. So the ideal is to be able to have both of your feet together and to sit down into a kind of squatting position and bring your knees apart so that your hands can come forward in front of you like that, okay? If that's too much for you, then you can always place a block underneath the buttock. So in this position here, maybe loading the legs with that kind of weight is too much. So you can put a block behind you and strive forward. And if your heels can't come to the floor, then you have an option of kind of putting a block underneath your heels and striving forward like that. So either or, you should have some options that will work for you. If you are able, however, to get your heels to the floor, you're lengthening forward through the legs and getting this nice extension into the back. This should be a lengthening and extension of that lower back area as you extend forward. If that's enough for you, you stay there. You know, if you've got your variation with your blocks and you're feeling like you're kind of testing the limits of your body, you can stay there. There's no need to go beyond that point. Otherwise, if you can come into this configuration with your feet together, heels down on the floor, knees apart, and lengthen forward, and you want to take it a little bit further, then you can always take your arms out to the side. So kind of pushing the backs of your arms against the front of the knees to strive a little bit further forward. If that's enough for you, once again, you stay there, whether you're on a block or not. And if you're able to, then you can turn your arms over, bring your hands back behind you, and grab onto your heels. So we're rotating by taking the thumbs down to the floor and then back, and then bending the elbows and grabbing onto the heels here. So it should, in essence, look like we've got a necklace on. So we're in Malasana here in this kind of garland pose variation. All right. So there's a subtle kind of striving forward. That pushing of the arms against the knees is key here, and a lengthening of the tailbone, which is a kind of a drawing in of the belly a little bit. Okay. So just hang out there with a conscious awareness of your breath, and that you're not kind of just dumping into the bones and into your sockets, your joints. So once you've stayed there for a little bit and you've got that nice extension opening, particularly in the sacrum for me and the shoulders, sure, then you can take your hands forward and just hinge forward and bring your knees down to the floor. And just take a breather there in this position. So you can always unflip your toes if you like. If you need a little bit more of a rest, you can unflip your toes and lengthen forward and come down into your Adho Mukha Virasana, down facing hero pose, sometimes called wide-legged child's pose. And just take a breath or two there. Ultimately coming back up again into this configuration with our knees lifted and our hands onto the floor. Okay. So we'll transition now into a balancing pose, crow pose. So your first port of call is to try to just get a sense of moving the weight forward into the hands and getting a bit of weight bearing into the hands. So the wrists do require a little bit of conditioning for this to happen. So it's not necessary to go straight into the balance, from the beginning. So what we'll do is we're keeping our knees wide apart. We have our hands shoulder width apart. We're going to put the knees high up onto the backs of the upper arms. We're going to lift the buttocks up and then slowly walk our feet forward, bending the elbows as we do so to try and get a little bit of the leg weight onto the backs of the arms. So you can see now the forearm should be perpendicular to the floor. We want to get it to perpendicular. So that is going to bear most of the weight, right? A little bit of pulling the shoulder blades away from the ears definitely helps. And if this is enough for you, you stay here. So you can feel a bit of weight bearing coming into the hands. At this point, you can start to practice with 1 foot at a time, lifting off the floor, okay? So as I said before, it's really about balance. So you don't want to, it's not about trying to lift yourself up off the floor prematurely. You want to shift your weight forward and then the feet naturally become light. So it's like guiding your weight forward and then the feet become light, and then at that point you can slowly start to lift the feet up toward the buttock. Okay, so just experiment with that. Like I said, quite strong. Can be quite taxing on the wrists. So just try it a couple of times, feel it out. Maybe lift one leg at a time. Maybe try both. But don't try and lift your feet if your balance isn't forward. Okay. Those of you that would like to try something a little bit more advanced, you can try to transition from malasana into crow. So you can see if you transition like this, you do have this tendency to have quite a high bum and your face down. So this is just to practice kind of getting that sense of balance. When you grow a little bit stronger, your practice becomes a little bit, you get a bit more strength in the arms and the wrists. Then you want to try and keep the back rounded and have the head and the shoulders and the bum more or less on the same plane. All right. So then you can go into your malasana. Okay. Remember, this was our malasana pose. We want to take our hands forward, pull the arms back against the legs and keep nice and tight. Then shift our weight forward and push into the arms to come up into our crow pose. So that will keep the body relatively flat to the floor. We can drop the bum down a little bit more and extend the chest a bit more and then start to straighten the arms as need be. Okay, so those are two different variations, but coming up from malasana tends to keep things a little bit tighter, although it's quite challenging to push into the arms and lift all the way up. So experiment with that, and then remember just to recoup with your knees apart once more, lengthening forward and coming down into your Adho Mukha Virasana as need be. Okay, you can take a few breaths there and just let the arms and the wrists recover. Okay. So now you're in your Adho Mukha Virasana. We're going to transition out of that into our Cobra pose, Salamba Bhujangasana. So it's a floor pose that works into the muscles of the back. And Salamba Bhujangasana is a great option for learning the correct muscular activation for back bends without overt strain in the body or without compromising the back, right? So we place our hands and our elbows shoulder width apart, tops of the feet on the mat. We're going to draw the shoulders away from each other, away from the front. So we're going to roll them away from the neck and integrate those shoulder blades once again. A lot of repetition in terms of the shoulder blade awareness. Okay, and then pushing down to the hands, shift your weight from one hip to the other and roll your legs in. So the tops of the middle thigh, knee, and foot are grounded down onto the floor. So we don't want to have our heels flipping out or our toes flopping out. We want to be on the midline of the leg there. Then you can use a number of different cues here. So if we just push into our arms and drag ourselves forward, we feel that compression coming into the lower back. Okay, so we want to mitigate that and we want to encourage the curve rather to go uniformly through the whole spine. So one of the best ways to do that is to keep your abdominal muscles online. So imagine that you're trying to pull your belly off the floor and or push your hips into the floor and feel that support that comes in, or that engagement that comes, the muscular engagement that comes into the abdomen at that point. Then holding that subtly, pull yourself, or imagine that you're dragging yourself forward along the mat, shoulders away from the ears and lengthening forward. So that stabilization at the core is really what we're working on a lot. The tops of the feet can push down. You can see if you can get all 10 toes down onto the floor. That's great. There will be some activation in your buttocks. But you don't want to super clench your bum, okay? You want to be able to kind of lengthen yourself forward and then use a subtle pulling into the belly that might get aggravated a little bit if you clench your buttocks too much. But the buttocks do move down towards the floor, so the hips kind of ground down, and that accentuates and opens in that front hip flexor area. As you pull yourself forward, just lengthen out of the waist and breathe. So looking up is a good idea to get this lifting into the chest, but at some point, drop your gaze without dropping the chest, the sternum, so that you come into a neutral neck while getting this really nice activation and stretch through the body. All right, and then we can release ourselves down at this point and bring our head onto our hands and just shimmy our hips from side to side, particularly if you're feeling a lot of discomfort in your lower back. Okay, but that's really probably just a sign that we need to work a little bit more on our abdominal engagement. All right, so we've got this supported cobra pose that helps us to train to open the body up and to hold the belly a little bit together. We'll now translate that into our Urdhva-Mukha Svanasana, so upward facing dog. A lot of the time people don't realize it because we're moving in a vinyasa, that they are dumping into that lower back excessively. So by taking it slowly and working through our Urdhva-Mukha Svanasana, upward facing dog slowly, we can start to see how we're supposed to hold the whole posture together as we move. So the first variation, we can take our hands onto blocks. So once again, the wrists might be feeling a little bit of discomfort here, and we will release them a little bit in a sec. We want to have our fingers wrapping around the blocks so we run on the edge, and we can come into our plank pose, so stacking the arms on top of one another and then lifting the knees up off the floor so we're in a good holding position. The toes are curled underneath towards the front, and when we come into our upward facing dog, we want to flip onto the tops of the feet, so that'll give us the distance to come through the arms and draw the shoulder blades back, right? So we're going to come onto the tops of the feet and come down and through into upward facing dog. So realign the muscles of the legs, so rolling the inner thighs up sometimes is a good idea for those of us that whose toes point out, or you want to kind of bring your feet into alignment as well. But the key here is to not let yourself dump through the back, okay? So you want to pull your belly in towards the spine and draw those shoulders away from the ears as you look up. So a strong activation into the belly should protect the back. Just hold as long as you need to. If it's too much, you've always got the option of lowering your knees. You can also go into your plank position, lower your knees, and then practice coming through like that. But try not to let the shoulders creep into the ears and try not to dump into the lower back. So that's your first variation. You can try that kind of going in from plank. Then you can also try pushing up from the floor in your downward facing dog, right? So same thing, you can have your blocks in place, but the blocks are going to be a little bit back because we're not rolling forward on the feet. We're going to start on the tops of the feet. So we're kind of already in this position on the tops of the feet, and we're taking our blocks kind of next to our side ribs. So draw the shoulders back, draw the elbows back, tops of the feet on the mat. Take a deep inhale, peel the top half of the body up off the floor, and then exhale, push into the hands and kind of lift yourself up. So you can see my mat kind of curling up a little bit because of this forward movement that's happening. And I really want to focus on drawing the shoulders back and then pulling that belly in and getting out of my lower back. So trying to pull the curve into the space between my shoulder blades rather than letting it fall into the lower back. And then you can reverse and come down as need be, okay? So when we were doing that previous pose, the supported cobra pose, it was a little bit easier to hold everything together and then practice. So that's a good way to build up the tone that you need for working into your your upward facing dog. If the blocks are easy enough for you and you'd like to transition into the full variation of the pose, you can get rid of the blocks for now, and you can try either pushing up from the floor, which is kind of, I guess, a little bit more advanced. So tops of the feet on the mat, hands quite close to the side chest, the side ribs, and then shoulders back and down, and pushing in and lifting up, okay? So that you got that variation. Or you can get rid of the blocks, and you can come into your flat plank pose. So you notice that when I'm in a plank pose, My arms are already kind of a little bit forward, and then I roll through them as I come onto the tops of the feet. So one of the things that I see a lot is that when people are coming into their upward facing dog, is that they're pushing with the chest. So you end up kind of getting this variation of upward facing dog. But we want to really work to draw the shoulders back and pull ourselves up, kind of with that drawing down of the shoulder blade, that pulls the front body up. So that's something that you can focus on while you're practicing. Okay, so shoulder blades are very important in terms of what's happening in our Surya Namaskar, our sun salutations, yeah, we can work a little bit now into some of the releases. So we'll do some, continue with the back bends, but we'll do reclining back bend with a little bit of support from block. All right, so we're going to do a reclining back bend. We got one of our blocks is within reach. You can have 2 blocks if you're a little bit taller or a little bit more flexible, but just keep at least 1 block handy. Okay, and we're going to lie down onto our backs, okay, and then bend the knees as need be to try and bring your heels of your feet close towards your bum, almost so that you can just brush the backs of the heels with the tips of the fingers. So finding this length that's relevant for your body. Okay, and then if we just lift the hips up towards the floor without thinking about it too much, the tendency is to puff the belly out, and once again, what's happening is we're getting this collapsing into the lower back. So we don't really want that to happen, but we do want to get this opening into the front body. So what we can do is we can think about kind of lifting the buttocks slightly off the floor, and then pulling the belly down towards the floor to elongate the lower back towards the tailbone. So to do that, you will also feel these lower band of abdominal muscles coming online, and then we continue to push into the heels. We lift the hips up, so we've got this extension and length here, this opening into the front body, and we're going to take our block and we're going to place it onto the sacrum. Okay, so it's right at the kind of base of the spine, where the spine joins into the hip girdle. So we don't want to have the block on our spine at all. We don't want to have it sort of impinging on any of the nerves that are kind of traveling out there into the legs. So in this position here, you should feel a nice opening into the front body, and you want to make sure that you're not pinching into the lower back. So like I said, if you're a little bit taller and you're not getting a nice opening here, you can take another block and place it under there, and maybe put another half block under there and get this nice opening here, which I'll demonstrate. So we place this half block here and we slide that in. So now you're getting a really nice stretch here. And every now and again, as the body opens a bit more in the front, you can lift your hips up, tuck the tailbone, and or pull, sort of engage the abdomen, like you kind of zipping up some jeans in the front there. Okay, and then place the sacrum back down. So in essence, the block is holding your pelvis in a tilted neutral position that should take pressure out of the lower back, and you're getting a good, nice stretch in here. If you're feeling like in this position here that your neck is being compromised, you can always put a folded blanket underneath the shoulders to kind of lift your shoulders up and prevent like a strong stretch into the back of the neck. Okay, so we're just placing something underneath your shoulders with the neck and the head off. Taking your hands back behind you, you can interlace your fingers and try to sort of shift your weight from one shoulder to the other to get a little bit more of the skin and muscles of the upper shoulder underneath you. And from this point, you want to make sure that we're not collapsing our chest, okay, so that sternum might want to just fall in passively if we're not being conscious there. So imagine that you're drawing, once again, that space between your shoulder blades, you're drawing it in and moving it forward towards the heart, moving the heart towards the sternum, and kind of moving the sternum forward, kind of towards the top of the head. And that's helped by this interlacing of the hands. You can hold the block with your forearms, or if you've got the configuration that I've got, you can kind of just grip around the bottom block with your hands. So just breathing here, taking some nice deep inhales and exhales, feeling that opening that we get, that stretch and opening into the whole diaphragm area. And ideally, you want to strive to almost have this side body here from the armpit
up towards, I guess, the side of the chest. You want to sort of work to get this to be as vertical as possible. So that really kind of opens up the armpit area as well. Okay. So like I say, if you enjoy what's happening here and you want to stay here a little bit longer, you're welcome to do that. If you want to challenge yourself a little bit more and you feel like, oh, I'm not really getting a strong opening anymore, then you can extend your legs one at a time and just keep the feet flexed and awake and feel that kind of stretches and lengthens through the whole front body into this extended variation of the posture. All right, but at any stage, if you feel impinging in the back or excessive compression into the back, try and lift the seat, tuck the tailbone, and take that pressure off by pulling your belly in or engaging the abdominal muscles to tighten up this gap between the hips and the bottom ribs. If it still persists, then immediately come out. So to come out, we lift the hips, we take the blocks out, one at a time, to the side, and then we are slowly lowering ourselves down. So upper back, then middle back, and then lower back down. So we come down in this kind of reverse wave that results in our lower back being nice and flat to the floor. We bring our knees together and the feet apart, making a kind of pyramid tent shape with our legs. And then we can just turn our palms up next to the side body and let the body soften and relax. So a little bit of a tuck in the chin, closing the eyes, and just breathe. So this configuration of the legs broadens the sacrum a little bit and gets a little bit of space into the back. And then you can also just sway the legs from one side to the other, so taking the knees out to the left and taking the right knee down to the left foot, and then coming back to center and then swaying them down to the other side. So dropping knee to opposite foot as you limber up a little bit into the spine. Okay, awesome. And then we're going to hug our knees to our chest. Just get a little bit of extra length into that lower back. And breathe. So just stretching out, lengthening out. Just get a bit of space there. You're also welcome to sort of shimmy from side to side if you like, to just get a bit of, remove any spasming that might have occurred in the spine there or any discomfort. And then taking your hands behind your knees, you can just rock forward and backward and slowly make your way up into seated posture. So coming into our seated posture, we'll just do a little bit of a twist to release the back, and then we'll do some forward folds. So we start out with our legs extended out in front of us. You can take a block and place it underneath your buttock, particularly if you find it difficult to sit upright. Okay, so what the block will do is it will elevate the bum, so it'll open up this angle here and make it easier for you to sit with the upright torso, because the legs won't be lifted up and kind of pushing back at you. But if you're able to sit in this upright position, that's fine. Take your hands back behind you, lift yourself up. You can pull the flesh of the buttocks back a little bit, which also helps you to come forward onto the sitting bones instead of dumping back onto the tailbone. And then we're going to bring our legs up towards our chest, so just a slightly different variation of getting into our twists. We're going to pull ourselves nice and tall up toward the chest, up towards the knees, so lifting the body up. Then we keep our right leg in, nice and close towards the chest. We extend the left leg out. We take the right foot over the left leg and grab around your shin, your right shin, with your left hand. Okay, so just make sure that the right hand is the hand that's back behind you. As your right buttock, it needs to root down. So as we push the right buttock down into the floor and you pull against your left, with your left arm against the right leg, you'll pull that lower back in and up a little bit more. And then we exhale, turn towards the right. So same thing here, just a little bit more shoulder attention, a shoulder integration. As we turn ourselves towards the right, we want to feel that the right shoulder blade is also turning in to flatten to the back as the right arm rolls and rotates out. See if you can do the same integration of that left shoulder blade. So kind of pulling the left shoulder blade a little bit flatter to the back, broadens across the chest, and also emphasizes or sort of enhances
the twist, should I say. You want to look over your right shoulder if possible, and make sure that you're not falling backward onto your tailbone. So striving upward. Use the inhale breath to lengthen the spine, and the exhale breath to twist a bit deeper. So twists are a great way to tune into that idea of being able to let go and emphasize, sort of increase the efficacy of your pose, not through force, but through surrender. So thinking about inhaling, lengthening up, you can close your eyes. And as you exhale, soften and allow yourself to twist a bit deeper with a little bit less muscular force. Okay, good. And dropping the chin down to the chest, return to face towards the front again. Bring the right foot back over, bring the left leg up, and just pull yourself nice and tall up towards the legs. Once you've got this length, you can hold your left leg in towards the body and extend your right leg along the floor. Take your left leg over the right this time, grab around your shin with your right hand, and take your left hand back behind you. So as long as the left hand is back behind you, then you know you're twisting in the right way, right? You're twisting towards the left. The left buttock, both buttocks need to be down, but in this case, the left buttock being the one with the bent leg, we want to kind of root that down, push it down into the floor, feel how it kicks against this arm. The arm and the leg pull against each other to lift you up a little bit taller. The left arm turns out behind you, and we integrate that shoulder blade as we turn towards the left. Then we want to bring a little bit of attention to the right shoulder blade as well. So see if you can pull that in a little bit more and turn a bit deeper. Your front foot should be awake and alive, okay? But it doesn't need to be flexed and forced, right? Just there's a tension there, and the leg isn't just like flopping around. So that extended leg. As you inhale, lengthen up into the crown of the head, and then exhale, twist it a little bit deeper. So you can get to a certain place with force, okay, with physical muscular activity and straining to try and get there. But at some point, all of that muscular activity is actually going to lock you out. So you need to learn how to breathe in with your eyes closed, or open is fine, but I find just having eyes closed, I can tune in a bit more to that sensation of inhale, lengthening up, and then as you exhale, try and soften and allow yourself to turn deeper. Not make yourself to turn deeper, but just allow yourself to turn a bit deeper as you look over the left shoulder. Always just kind of repeating that mantra to yourself of inhale, lengthening up, and exhale, twisting. And then dropping the chin to the chest, turning to face towards the front. We extend both of our legs out. As need be, you can draw the flesh out from underneath your buttocks again. If you're not able to reach your toes, okay, so that's like not including rounding the spine and bending the legs to try and get there, right? We want to be able to keep our legs straight, and we want to be able to keep our spine upright. So if you're not able at that point to reach the feet, then keep a belt handy, or use your belt as need be, and you flip your belt over your feet. And this is particularly effective for people that are a little bit stronger but have less flexibility. So we can actually use our strength to develop flexibility. So you're holding onto the belt. You want to have your arms as long as necessary so that you're not bending the elbows to pull yourself forward. You're rather pulling the shoulder blades back, right? So a lot of shoulder blade focus happening today. We want to sort of get those arms nice and straight, then pull the shoulder blades flat back behind us. Feel how that broadens across the chest and helps us to get that lower back in and up as we come forward onto the sitting bones. Once you're in this nice, tall, upright position, maybe this is as far as you can go, and you practice here because this is, doing it properly, right? We want to get the knees and the feet to point up at the ceiling. So if your knees are rolling out, your feet will look a little bit distorted. So almost trying to flatten the feet towards an imaginary wall in front of you. And then once you've got this lift, and maybe you want to go a little bit further, you can let go of the belt, or you can keep holding onto the belt. But concentrate on keeping those shoulder blades behind you as you come forward. The minute your shoulder blades separate and you round the spine, you've kind of lost the pose. Because here we can't breathe properly. It's really about keeping this chest open so we can get good, open, sort of unencumbered breath. And then we can come forward. So in time, the back body in our forward bends should become stronger, more stable, because we're using this contraction of the musculature of the back body to pull and open the front body up. And then the hinging is happening directly at the hips, which is where the hinging is designed to happen. Those of you that are able to reach to your feet, perhaps you can just reach back and pull the flesh of your buttocks out again and feel that it helps you to kind of come a little bit further forward. And then find neutral back of the neck without rounding the spine. So looking forward is a good idea, to lengthen the body forward, but then we don't want to crunch the back of the neck. We want to keep the spine neutral. So as you hold this posture out, see if you can let go of unnecessary tension or any kind of jaw clenching, forceful activity that feels like, it's you versus your body. Can you soften out of that way of being and just allow the body to open with each inhale and exhale. All right. Okay, awesome. So you can hold that posture for as long as you like. Otherwise, we're going to transition now into our Shavasana. Okay, so we're going to shimmy down our mat a little bit, lie down on our back. Hugging the knees to the chest is a good way to lengthen the lower back and kind of get the buttocks out of the way, in case they've kind of been moved under the back as we've shimmied around. So just drawing the knees to the chest, get a nice length there. If you need to shimmy a little bit from side to side, rolling around to massage the muscles of the back, that's fine. Otherwise, with knees bent, release one foot at a time down to the floor, and then extend one leg at a time along the floor. So now we've got a natural curvature in the lower back. The buttocks are drawing subtly away from the back with the help of the sticky mat. The feet are flopping out to the side and they're a little bit wider than hip distance apart. Then we'll push our elbows into the floor to tuck the shoulder blades, flat to the back. Once again, we don't want them pinching together behind us, we just want them flattened. And that gives us opening across the chest and puts our arms in a nice neutral position, so that when we bring our hands down, palms facing up next to our side body, we can feel that there's less impingement or compression in the shoulder joint. The blood can flow through that armpit area, the front of the shoulder. Really, there's just a lot of openness here in this natural configuration, this healthy configuration, where the shoulder is supposed to be, where the arm bones are supposed to be integrated, and that nice sort of passive stretching and opening across the chest. So just notice the breath flowing in and out through the nostrils. You can tuck the chin a little bit if you need to get some elongation, a little bit of elongation in the back of the neck. So we take our breath into different parts of the body that aren't necessarily associated with breath naturally, so we can breathe into the eyes. And as we exhale, we soften the eyes and allow them to sink back away from the eyelids. We can breathe into the jaw, and as we exhale, we can drop the jaw slightly, allowing the tongue and the throat to relax and soften. Just let the skin and muscles of the face completely relax. You can breathe into the forehead. And as you exhale, imagine the brain dropping away from the front of the skull towards the back of the skull. Feel the rise and fall of the breath in the torso, and use that to diffuse tension through the torso. As you inhale, you can exhale and allow the chest, the upper back, the spine, the belly, everything to sort of relax in a wave. You can breathe up into the shoulders on your next inhale. And as you exhale, release tension through the shoulders, relaxing the arms, the elbows, forearms, palms, the hands, fingers. You can breathe into the belly. And as you exhale, soften the groin, soften the buttocks, the legs,
fronts and backs of the thighs, the knees, the calves and shins, the feet and toes, all relaxed, all completely at ease. So if you're tired and fatigued and your mind kind of just wanders off and you feel a bit sleepy, that's fine. There's no need to forcefully stay present. But if you're able to, keeping the mind sort of soft, there's no need to concentrate with a sort of contracted brow or with hardened eyes. Just let your attention rest on the breath. Just feeling that subtle inhale and exhale breath. As you breathe in, realize you are breathing in. And as you breathe out, realize you are breathing out. So let your attention rest gently, softly on the breath. Without disturbing the mind, just become aware once again of your arms, your legs, the head and the torso all resting on the floor. You can subtly breathe into the periphery, breathing into your hands and your feet, crown of your head. And slowly bring one hand at a time to rest on the abdomen, feeling the rise and fall of the breath underneath your hands here. And then gently rolling over onto your right side into a fetal position. So supporting the head with the right hand, drawing the knees and chin to the chest, around the spine. Feel the innate containment and security in this posture. And then bring the left hand on the floor in front of your face. Just push into the left hand, leading with the left shoulder. Bring your head up last into a comfortable seated position. Moving slowly, gently, so as not to disturb this kind of peace and tranquility that you've helped to cultivate. So alert without rigidity, without hardness, and relaxation without dullness, without flaccidity. Somewhere in the middle, that enlivened, aware stance. That is completely at ease. Bring your hands in front of your heart in prayer position. Raising the hands up between the eyebrows and back down to the heart. Namaste. Om Bolo Sat Guru Bhagavan Ki. Thank you, thank you. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the future. Feel free to email me or send me any comments, and if you have any feedback, that'd be awesome. Stay well.